Hello again and welcome to the 21 July 2017 edition of Portsmouth This Week. Our special guests today are Cindy Calavy, the president of the Portsmouth Community Theater, and Richard Schmidt, who is a Portsmouth Community Theater board member. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Doug.
You guys are one of my favorite community organizations, so I'm really glad to have you on the show.
Well, thank you.
Before we get into this actual organizational stuff, I wonder if you could say a few words about your own background, Cindy, and yours, Richard. Just how did you get into this stuff?
Well, why don't you go first, because I dragged you in.
I don't mean into this stuff. I mean into this theater.
Acting, yes.
Well, it was about after I retired about 8 years ago. Cindy needed someone to be in a play, and she thought of me. And I had like 2 weeks to prepare, and suddenly I was doing a comedy in the Portsmouth Community Theater, and I liked it. I just tried to, as much as possible, continue doing it.
He was playing the old actor in the Fantastics.
Yeah, we do old well, don't we?
Yes,
we do
did.
old well, yes.
Yeah.
Cindy, how about you?
Well, I was an orange in second grade. You want to hear my first line? You called me sour, did you, Paul? My brother's lemon and grapefruit may be sour, but I'm not.
And you still remember that?
I do. It's funny how it's up there.
Yeah.
And I was not really interested in theater when I was in school because I was very shy, believe it or not.
No.
It wasn't until I graduated that I started getting more involved. I went to the Hartford Conservatory. I wound up being in a summer theater down here in Newport, wound up marrying the guy that played my husband in the show, had kids, they were interested in theater. And then one day, Rebecca Vickers, whose child was also in the Newport Children's Theater, said, why don't we have something like this in Portsmouth, where children and adults can be in theater together. So at that point, I was active in Arts for Life, and I knew Priscilla Wimpress. So the three of us got together and put our heads together and talked to the Jamestown Theater about bylaws and put in the paperwork, and then that was 96, and in 97, the Portsmouth Community Theater was born. And the very first production took place, I think it was in November, at Comm in Fence Point, and the first production was Lovers and Other Strangers.
Yeah.
And since that time, we've done musical reviews and comedies and musicals. We did The Wizard of Oz, The Hobbit, The Fantastics,
Carousel.
Carousel.
Yeah, a little bit of everything,
yeah,
I know.
Yeah. Mostly light stuff.
How many people are actually involved in the theater group?
Well, we have a core group of about 10 to 12 people, mostly board members who wear any hat I ask them to wear. Thank you so much. And then when we put on a show, our ranks swell. And because everybody wants to be on a show, unfortunately, everybody wants to do all the work before and after, so people don't usually stick around.
Yeah. So how do you get extra people when you require more for one of your plays?
Generally, if it's a play, there's actors in the play who know somebody, and so we cover all the bases.
Okay. Do you do auditions for people, or how do people join if they wanted to?
Yes, we do have auditions, and they're usually in the Portsmouth Times and the Daily News, on our website, on our Facebook page, which is Portsmouth Community Theater. Like us on Facebook. And sometimes there'll be flyers out at the library or Clements Market, word of mouth. There's also theater websites that we put information about auditions, because that's where people that are looking for auditions mostly look at.
Yeah, you guys have recently updated your webpage.
It's in flux. We're just now going through that.
It's always in flux with technology.
Right.
But people should be able to go to that eventually, at least,
right,
and see exactly what you're doing and where your performances are.
Right.
You mentioned musicals. I would think musicals would be tough, especially for somebody like me who has no voice whatsoever.
Yes, it is. The last musical we did was Carousel, and it almost killed me, because I was directing and producing and trying to. We had taped music, but like I said, it almost killed me. I said after that, I'm not going to be everybody in charge of this. So we haven't done a musical since.
Where in town have you all performed?
We've.
In fact, we're on the island, I guess I should say.
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
you've done
Well, we did a Love, Loss, and What I Wore at St. Lucy's last May. We've We've done, we just did a fundraiser at Common Fence Point. We're performing at what is now the Aquidneck Island Christian Academy. Prior to that, it was the old Penfield School, and we performed there. We did the historical drama at the Valley Inn,
Yeah.
the Connell story, which that's where the Connell house used to be, so it was quite interesting. I think that's about it. Can you think of anywhere else we performed?
Well, at the Historical Society itself, we've done.
Well, yeah, we've
Yeah.
done living history things
Well,
there.
I'm particularly, the one I like, of course, was Ghostly Witness.
Yes.
The story of Rebecca Cornell's murder and her son's subsequent death by hanging for it. You guys have been very, in fact, that's a great example because you all have been very helpful, I think, in getting people involved in Portsmouth history. You did this Ghostly Witness for us during our 375th celebration year. And
Right, we were looking to see what can the community theater do during this special year.
Yeah.
And fortunately, Richard and Gloria Schmidt are wonderful historians,
Yeah.
and they came up, Gloria got the transcripts, which I guess are online, and we went through them and put our heads together and developed a play, and that's what we like
I
to
thought
do.
it was great because this is the kind of story, this Rebecca Cornell, 1673,
Yeah.
that nobody's probably heard about until we brought it up and you all brought it up. And thank you, Richard and Gloria, as well, for putting together that great script, which is basically the transcripts.
Yes,
from
we're
the
fortunate
trial.
to have transcripts that we
Yeah.
could use and shorten a little bit, but yes.
Yeah,
Kind of update the language,
Update
too.
the language a little bit.
yeah, that helped for some of us who tried to put our toe in the water of.
Right.
That's right, we
of
dragged
doing
you
this.
into that
Yes,
one.
Yes, he was in that.
Are there any plans for more historic plays or anything like that? Do you have anything in the can?
Yeah,
Well-
Richard, why don't you take that one?
Well, of course, we have the Living History Day coming up. History Comes Alive, and that's in October. And we did something similar to that last year, where people from Portsmouth history showed up in character and
At the
talked
Historical
about at the
Society.
Historical Society. We're going to do it again. It'll be different people. So if you came last year, you can still come this year because it'll be different people. For example, James Preston, who was the first schoolmaster at the southernmost school in 1725, he'll be back, and I think he may even give you a spelling test this time. George Manchester, who was the clerk at the Christian Union Church in the 1870s, will talk about the life of the church. And Emmeline Eldridge, who was the director of the Social Studio at Bristol Ferry, will come and talk about the Social Studio and our friend and artist and photographer Sarah Eddy. And we're hoping to have a member of a Portsmouth farm family also come and talk about farming in Portsmouth in the early 20th century. We are looking into another possible courtroom drama. My wife Gloria and Marge Webster, also of the Historical Society, discovered some interesting research into an unusual murder that took place in the Portsmouth coal mine village in the 1870s.
Another murder.
Another murder.
Who would have thought in downtown Portsmouth?
And a lot of people don't even know Portsmouth had coal mines, but we did, and they had their own village, and it was an unusual murder that happened there, and it eventually went to court. And we don't have exact transcripts, but we have a lot of newspaper accounts and some court records, copies of some of the exhibits, actually, we've gotten. And so we have a draft script right now. It needs a lot more work, but we're hoping to get that ready for next summer. So
Yeah.
we should have another murder courtroom drama.
Okay, that's great. So you'll have a couple of murders in the can that you can
That's
Yes,
right.
and-
throw out
yes.
there. Let me back up to the History Comes Alive,
Yes.
because I have to say, I think the first time I went to the Historical Society to visit it back a couple of years ago, I went and Gloria was playing. She was one of the characters.
Yes.
And I was so impressed. This was such a great way for people to learn about history. You know, it's like you're talking, and the thing is, you guys are so well prepared. It's like you're talking to the people that lived back then.
That's the idea.
And I thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and I immediately joined the society. it's unfortunate we can only do that probably once a year. It's something I'd love to figure out a way to get either our board or our membership to be able to do a couple times a year. But I know there's got to be a lot of preparation to this. Like typically, like as an example, when you guys wrote Ghostly Witness, how long did that take?
Oh, that took several months of research and writing it and
back and
revising
forth.
it back and forth. Cindy's very good at understanding how in a script it can be presented as a play, because a lot of times, I'll write something, it's fine for reading, but no, I want someone to say this and everybody understand it. So it did take several months to do that.
Yeah, well, Jim did a great job, of course, at your husband, at kind of being the MC, more or less. It was a great format that made a lot of sense, and it allowed characters to kind of come and go.
Right.
And there were characters all over the place during that period. So
Yes.
I thought it was great, and excellent job for you guys for doing that.
Thanks. Maybe we should talk about our current production.
I was just going to say, I know you had something coming up next week. So
Yeah, it's called You Can't Take It With You, and Richard plays Mr. Kirby, so why don't you talk a little bit about
Yes, what's interesting about the show is that it's a comedy that was originally produced in the 1930s, and it was written by George S. Kaufman and Moss Hart, who are famous in the theater. And it won a Pulitzer Prize. It was later adapted for a movie, so a lot of people may have heard of it. It's, as I said, it's in the 30s, so some of the references are a little dated, but that's okay. A lot of the lines and everything, as I say, it's a comedy. It's still pretty funny. It's about a family of, we'll call them erratic, eccentric, somewhat crazy, but they live in New York City, and there's a grandfather who decided to stop working long ago and have fun, and he's kind of neglected to pay income taxes. But he's got a daughter who just keeps writing plays and never gets anything published. Her husband, the only thing we know he does is make fireworks in the basement, which may not be a good idea.
I can see the finale.
Their other daughter, Essie, she's good at making candy, and she's been trying to be a ballerina. She's taking lessons from this very large Russian for 8 years, and she's not very good at it. And she has a husband who likes to print things, anything. He just likes to, if it sounds good, he prints it. And there are several other odd characters who show up there, and they have a daughter named Alice, who's the only normal person in the family. She works at a brokerage on Wall Street, and she wants to marry the boss's daughter.
The boss's son.
The boss's son.
Oh, I was going to say the daughter would be really interesting.
No, he wants to marry the boss's son.
Not in 1930.
No, not 1930s. And I play the boss, so I'm very conservative, business-minded. That's all that's on my mind. I'm rich, and I come with my proper wife, and we're going to have dinner and meet the family, and just doesn't work as well.
Breaks loose.
Yeah, I can imagine. Although I have to say, it sounds kind of like a typical family. In my
I would hope it's not a typical family, but it's very interesting.
Now, where is this going to be performed?
It'll be at the Christian Academy on their stage. We're very grateful that they let us use the space.
Okay, and date, times?
If you go to www.aboutpct.org, the flyer's there with all the information you could ever want to know.
Okay.
And 2 weekends.
You guys have a Facebook page and everything else?
Right.
What is the charge for?
Well, the first Friday is pay what you can, and the other information is on the website.
Okay, now when you say weekends, Friday and Saturday?
Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday matinee.
Sunday
matinee. So Friday and Saturday at 7 o'clock.
Okay, so this starts literally next week.
Yep.
Yes.
The 27th?
28th.
28th.
I'd like to thank you both for coming on. I hope everybody goes to your new performance.
Well, if they want to laugh, if they need a laugh.
We all need a laugh.
It's very funny.
Thanks very much for coming aboard.
Thanks, Doug.
Welcome back. Our second segment of today's show, our special guest is Todd Drake, Portsmouth new wastewater manager. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Before we get into the details about the wastewater management program that we have going on, I wonder if you could talk about yourself a little bit and how you got to be the wastewater manager at Portsmouth.
In a nutshell, I started in 2006 with one of the local service companies for all the advanced treatment systems. When I started, there were about 800 customers. and proceeded over the 6 years I was there to about 3,000. About a year and a half in, the owners of the company asked me to be the service manager. The company was growing, customer base had doubled in that time frame. So they asked me to serve as service manager, put me through a bunch of training, and ever since then I've built relationships with engineers, installers throughout the states, other service companies, that sort of a thing.
Yeah, now where was this again?
It was a local company here in Portsmouth. They're no longer here.
Okay.
They're over in Tiverton now. They moved a couple years back. But they're still here, and their business, as far as I know right now, they've got about 5,000 customers between just Rhode Island and Massachusetts. They're also servicing systems down in Pennsylvania and Maryland as well at this point. So,
Educational background? Military
educational
service, or anything
background,
like that?
mostly involved in electronics, going back to when I was about 12. My college degree is a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, which doesn't translate to any of this at all.
Yeah,
But
I know about that.
been working with the people in customer service, again, all related to electronics, pretty much my whole life.
Yeah.
So it kind of helps day to day, working with the citizens and working with the DEM, and working with
Presumably you
engineers.
know how to keep up with technology, because us older folks have problems with it.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of stuck at one point where I kind of found my interest, and that was that. So
I try to get a smart 13-year-old, but anyway.
I've got a smart 14 at home.
Can we recap kind of the history of our current system and why we have a wastewater management
Sure.
plan?
Yeah. Basically, the waters around the town and all over Quidnick Island have been shown to be polluted with various things over the years. The state has conducted water sampling year after year after year. Roughly around 2010, the state issued a notice of violation to the town saying, you're polluting the waters, you've got to clean up your act. In the meantime, there were some studies that had been undertaken by a couple of different engineering firms brought in by the town. The most recent was in 2009 by Woodard and Curran, and they did quite an in-depth analysis of the Island Park, Portsmouth Park, and they included some of common fence in some of their recommendations as well. So the basics are that the state was set to fine the town quite a large sum of money. And in 2014, the state and the town entered into a memorandum of agreement, which was signed in 2014. And the outcome of that was the town's wastewater management district ordinance, which was signed in the fall of 2015.
And I think all of this is available on the town website on your page.
That's
Pages,
correct.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
if you go to portsmouthri.com, up near the top is the government tab, kind of right in the middle of the page
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Pulled that down, and the wastewater page is at the very bottom.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff on that site, by the way. A couple years ago, your office sent notices out to residents of Island Park and Portsmouth Park requiring first maintenance inspections of their wastewater systems by 1 July, which we just got through here. All cesspools within 200 feet of the coast and failing septic systems were supposed to be replaced immediately, or people would face legal action. How is that working out?
So far, it's worked out very well. The map to my right here shows those areas, and the numbers correspond with the mailing groups as they were sent out.
Okay, that's kind of the sequence.
Correct. That's the exact sequence that we went through. Right now, we had just finished Zone 8, which is kind of that upper portion of Portsmouth Park up near East Main Road. And the mailings for Group 9 just went out in July, 1st of July. So I actually presented some numbers to the state right after the 1st of July based on the numbers that had come in through that point. And as of July 1, we were running about 88% compliance. We have 880 individual septic systems in these 8 areas. To date, as of yesterday afternoon, we had 797 of those inspected, so a little over 90% compliance right now. So, and split roughly 50-50 between the advanced treatment systems that aren't, quite up to inspection just yet, as well as the conventional systems and cesspools. So we're running just about 45 of those conventional and cesspools that haven't been inspected. Most of those are in Zone 8.
Okay, now if what happens if somebody doesn't do the inspection or they fail the inspection?
If they fail the inspection, there's a notice that goes out giving that property owner 60 days to apply to the state for a repair permit. If they fail the inspection, it's kind of a process that they have to go through with the state. It takes some time to establish the permit and go through the process of design and all of that.
Sure.
If it's somebody who just avoids the inspection altogether, they also have sort of a time frame that's laid out by the ordinance. We give them a 30-day grace period after their initial 60-day period for inspection. If they get to that point 30 days after the due date, basically, they will get a notice of violation, which then requests 30 more days to perform. Once that 30-day period from the notice of violation expires, they're issued a court summons.
Okay, and so that's when these cases go to court, and I presume this is our court?
That's correct.
Portsmouth Municipal Court.
Municipal Court and Town Hall. That takes place on the third Wednesday of every month.
Third Wednesday, okay. How many cases do you know have been brought to the court?
So far, about 27
Okay.
have been brought through the system. Most of those are dismissed usually after that first appearance. Sometimes due to circumstances they'll stretch out a little bit. There are a couple in the court system right now that started out as a system that hadn't been inspected. Once it finally got inspected, it failed, and then they have to kind of proceed through, like I said before, the design phase and permitting phase. So sometimes they have to come back and give a status report to the judge, and it could take a few months worth of appearances.
Now, has there been any indication from DEM about our water quality improving since we started doing this, or
to my
is
knowledge,
it too early? Maybe.
Yeah, to my knowledge, the last study that was done was 2014.
Okay.
So I actually called up to the DEM the other day to see if there was any new data, and I haven't received that call back yet. I did talk to somebody this morning as I was coming down to the studio, and we'll be put in touch with the right person probably this afternoon. But nothing up to date as far as I know.
Yeah.
The town has undertaken, as part of the memorandum of agreement, testing of all the catch basins and outfalls throughout that area of town, and those sample results were done this spring, and we haven't gotten the results yet, but the testing was done by an outside lab.
Okay, do you know if once those tests come back, are they going to be posted somewhere? Is this? I think people might want to see what kind of problems we have out there.
Sure. I don't know that they'll be posted or if there's any plan to do that, but I can certainly ask that question, and if there is a spot, maybe we can revisit that at another time.
Absolutely. You can always come back here and we could go through some of this stuff. Are there constantly kind of cases still pending, wastewater management cases still pending in the court system? And
There are. Right now, there are about 6 people that have, again, one type of case or another. Right as of the August 16th date, I believe we'll have 4 of those people coming back. 2 of them have since installed a system that took a little while for them to do, but they're now installed, and so they'll be giving the judge a sort of a final status report at that point.
The system seems very fair because people have a couple of times where they just get warnings.
Right.
And I think particularly as an island community, we're really dependent on good water out there for recreation and everything else. I know these systems are expensive, and however, financial assistance is available, as I understand.
That's very true.
Can you talk about that for a second?
That's very true. Yeah, there are a handful of different programs. One that was started by the town is the Portsmouth Septic Loan Program. That is available to citizens with a failed system or a cesspool that needs to be replaced per the regulations of the state and the town. That program is a 5% interest, 10-year term, up to $25,000. My understanding is about a dozen people have taken advantage of that program. That was put in place before the town was eligible for the Community Septic System Loan Program, which took place. That came into effect about a year ago, and so that's now available. It's 1%.
That's a C-slip thing?
The C-slip loan is that's correct. So that's 1% interest. Similar terms, 10 years, $25,000. You apply for it just like any other loan, and that's serviced through Rhode Island Housing.
Yeah.
We're kind of in our third round of funding with the CISLIP program right now. There are a handful of people on the waiting list. The program takes a little bit of time to administer, and Rhode Island Housing is doing a great job, taking care of those folks.
Now, that could be a problem, presumably, if they're up against court cases requiring them to get started on something.
Correct. And typically what I do is if I know somebody has started the application process with the state and they're also filing with Rhode Island Housing for the CISLIP loans, I won't bring them into court at that point. I know they're trying, I know they're doing what they can do, so we try to make sure that it's just the people that are really avoiding the inspections or installing a new system that end up in the court system.
So Todd, when can the rest of Portsmouth residents expect to get their inspection notices?
Well, right now, the Common Fence Point area and the Hummocks right here, they receive their notices July 1. That will, the notices go out in, say, 60 days, but we're going to extend that out because it's quite a large group. Group number 10, kind of over by the Mount Hope Bridge, that area will receive their notices in the spring of 2018. Then late summer will be group number 11, which is kind of along the eastern coast, moving into group number 12, kind of working our way towards the Middletown border. The inspection program, the first maintenance inspection program, runs through 2022. That's when we have the agreement with the state that will complete all of those first maintenance inspections.
And then thereafter, it's every 5 years?
Every 5 years for a conventional system. Cesspools have to be inspected every 2 years or until failure, or until certain dates, depending on location, they'll have to be replaced.
I would guess, people are very inventive at this stuff. I've heard some people even argue that this pollution out there is not ours. It's coming down from Fall River, et cetera, but I can imagine some of these things could be quite inventive, when it comes to this stuff. And how do these things play out in court? I mean, the judge gives them a hearing, I guess, and then what says, okay, go back and do it.
Right. Pretty much that's how it plays out. There aren't too many excuses. Once they get to court, they either realize that it's now very serious and time to get serious. So at that point, they kind of say, okay, I'll start the process.
Do we have a lot of cesspools here in this area, particularly in the...
We do. We do. When I started back in November, the list showed about 145 cesspools in that particular area.
Those are basically holes dug in the ground. Right?
Exactly. And they take many different forms. It's a hole in the ground, sometimes lined with stone or brick. Sometimes it's a 55-gallon drum with holes poked in it. Sometimes it's just an open pit in the ground, just dirt, walls, and floor. So right now we have located almost 200 in that area. Wow. So in the 8 months that I've been with the program, about 50 or so have been uncovered that we thought were conventional systems.
I have to say that your pages on the town website, as I said, have a lot of information. They go through all of this stuff. We're just about out of time here. How can people contact you directly, though, if they have questions or comments?
They can reach me. My direct line at Town Hall is 401-643-0380. They can also reach me at tdrake@portsmouthri.com.
Okay, thanks very much.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for joining us. See you next time.